The scriptures encourage us repeatedly to give thanks to God, to appreciate God for all the good things that he has done to us, and to recognize the many blessings that we have received. But I think sometimes we tend to forget this attitude of continual thankfulness and gratefulness to God. Just on Sunday now past, I had my one foot was sore. I've had an Achilles tendon injury a couple of months ago, and every now and again it flares up, and it flared up on Sunday. And so as I was coming to church, I was really struggling to walk. It was very painful, and I could feel I was limping badly. And before the service, I prayed that God would just relieve the pain so that I could get through the service without looking too much like I was crippled. And in fact, the pain did ease off. And by the end of the service, I suddenly realized my foot wasn't really feeling sore anymore, and I wasn't walking with any great difficulty. It was only a bit later during the morning as I was going home that I realized, first of all, that I had just assumed my foot was getting better. I hadn't made the connection between the fact that I had prayed just before the service for healing, and that, in fact, my foot had been healed during that time, at least for that time. And secondly, that I hadn't acknowledged God's blessing in bringing me this relief from pain. And so I turned to him in gratitude and thankfulness, belatedly, of course, but still at least managed to catch myself and remember. I think when I reflect back on my life, and maybe this is true for you as well, there can be many times when we have prayed for something, and then that prayer has actually been answered, but we have almost forgotten that we've prayed about it, and so we just accept it as a natural thing. Something just improved, something just got better, and we don't go back to God to say, thank you for this gift that you've given us. Or maybe that's just me. Our reading for today comes from Luke chapter 17, and it's the story from verses 11 to 19. So Luke 17, verses 11 to 19, is the story about 10 lepers who see Jesus coming, and they sort of stand as a group at a distance, and they call out loudly saying, Lord Jesus, Master, have pity on us. And they don't specifically ask for healing, but they ask for pity or mercy. And Jesus then says to them, go show yourselves to the priests. That's all he says. Go show yourselves to the priests. He doesn't do anything like he sometimes does with mud and spit, and he'll touch somebody's eyes to restore their sight. He doesn't perform any ritual. He doesn't even say, you have been healed. He just says to them, go and show yourselves to the priests. And then Luke writes, as they went, they were cleansed. As they went, they were cleansed. I love that verse. It really is. It's a small little insignificant verse, it seems, but it is one of my favorite verses. Every time I read it, I am struck with this idea that as they are walking to the priests, doing what Jesus asked them to do, which is to go and show yourself to the priests. So as they are doing what Jesus asks, they are healed. Almost like a walking prayer. As they're walking along the road to go and see the priests, God heals them. Jesus does not say anything about healing them. He doesn't say you are healed. He doesn't say if you go, you will be. He doesn't say I've healed you, now go. He just says go and show yourselves to the priests. And as they carry out his word, they are healed, cleansed. It's really quite remarkable. It points in a way to the subtlety and the understatedness of miracles. Sometimes we're looking for miracles that are grand and big and flashy, but this miracle was really small and unobtrusive. You could almost imagine that some of those lepers might not have realized that they had been cured of leprosy until somebody looked at them and said, but you look fine. It's so understated. God's working is very often quiet and subtle. But one of them realizes or sees, Luke says, when he saw that he was healed, he comes back to Jesus and he praises God in a loud voice, and he throws himself at Jesus' feet and thanks him. And then Luke adds this little, and he was a Samaritan, as if because he was a Samaritan, somehow he couldn't have recognized Jesus' work anymore. He's pointing to the outsiderness of this one man, who is the man who comes back. And Jesus says to him, were not all 10 cleansed? And it's interesting that he says that, because the cleansing didn't take place while the lepers were with Jesus. The cleansing took place as they were leaving and going to the priests. So Jesus wouldn't have seen them being healed. But of course, he is the worker of the healing, and so he knows. But he says, were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner? And then he turns to the one who has come back and he says to him, rise and go, your faith has made you well. Rise and go, your faith has made you well. And what I find interesting about this last words of Jesus is that the leper had already been cleansed. He'd been cleansed as he was walking away from Jesus towards the priests. Having got there or gone some distance, he realizes that he was cleansed, and he turns around and he comes back to Jesus and engages with him. And then Jesus says to him, your faith has made you well. But in fact, his faith had already made him well. Jesus had already healed him sometime before. So what is the benefit of this man's gratitude? In a sense, the point of this passage, the reason why Luke includes this story, is not just to show Jesus' capacity to heal, because we have seen that many times before, but to show the need for gratitude, that we recognize that God has healed us. And to illustrate this in this narrative here, he uses the example of a non-Jewish person, a non-believer, who experiences healing. And it is him, the Samaritan, who's the one who comes back to give thanks to Jesus. But there is no apparent benefit of that thanksgiving, because Jesus just confirms what's already been done. Your faith has made you well. He says rise, not because the man is paralyzed, but just because he got down on his feet to give thanks to Jesus. Jesus doesn't give him anything extra for expressing gratitude. So is there a benefit of gratitude? Does it benefit us in any way to express gratitude to God when he works in our lives? I think that the one thing that differentiates this man from the other 9, apart from the fact that he comes back to Jesus, is that he gets the opportunity, which the other 9 don't have, to engage more with Jesus. The other 9 are healed, for sure, and that's wonderful. They haven't given thanks, but they've been healed. Their life has been improved. God has worked in them out of his grace and his generosity, and they will live a better life than they did before. But what differentiates this man from the other 9 is that he now has the opportunity to engage with Jesus. He has a one-on-one with Jesus. And so, friends, when we are grateful to God for the things that he does in our lives, it is in a sense just a natural and perhaps a right and correct acknowledgement to God that he has done something good for us. But what it also does is it draws us back into the presence of God. We came to God at the beginning when we asked for something. And now that we've received it, we come back into the presence of God. We have these 2 opportunities to engage with him, 2 opportunities to spend time with him. One in which we ask for something, and the other in which we give thanks for something. And that is the greatest gift of all.